The 21st century is the age of visual media. Political news is covered very much by the visual media of today, and people read less and less when it comes to almost any area of life. And so that means that they rely more and more on visual media. The original visual medium was television, and television has played a huge role in American politics. It continues to do so, but to a lesser extent, now that the internet and the social media that it spawned have absorbed much of traditional media's role. Nevertheless, we should pay homage to television as the original medium, visual medium, and also as the historical prologue to give us a proper context in which we can place the more diverse visual media that the internet brought us and which we use in the 21st century. Television began to appear in large numbers in American homes only in the 1950s. Thus, you can see that in 1950, only 9% of all American households had a television set. Just over a decade later, in 1962, 90% of American households had at least one television set. So during that decade, during the 1950s, we saw the rise of television, and it had profound impact on American and world politics. The civil rights movement partly drew its strength from television coverage of events that took place in the southern United States and which fueled the outrage outside the South, and which led public opinion to shift and to put pressure on the political system to finally change social arrangements in the South. By approximately 1978, virtually every household had at least one television set. And today, most middle-class homes have multiple television sets precisely because they have become so cheap thanks to technological advancements. Color television began to appear in American homes only in the mid-1960s. Thus, in 1964, 3% of American households had a color TV set, and colors did not look natural. They were kind of very heavily saturated, blue or red, because the vacuum tube technology was fairly primitive, and so you had color TVs that were not particularly good. But as the quality improved and the prices fell, more and more Americans switched from black and white to color TVs. So by 1978, 78%, more than 3 out of 4 American households had a color TV set. And that, of course, enhanced the appeal of this visual medium, of television. It's just like adding food, adding flavor to food. It makes food more tasty. You want to eat more of it. And so that's the analogy. If you add color to television, it makes it so much more appealing, and it makes you want to watch it more. So you spend or waste, depending on your perspective, more hours watching television. And you have also, starting in the 1970s, a very rapid growth of cable and satellite television, fueled very much by sports. ESPN was the first 24-hour cable network, was launched in 1979. And then a year later, it was a non-sports network. It was a news network, CNN, which was launched in 1980. But if you go back to the basic statistics, in 1977, about 16% of American households had a cable TV. And by the end of the century, in 1999, 68% of households had a cable or satellite television. So how can television transform our lives despite the obvious fact that we watch more of it? And even though now many of us use electronic devices like iPads and computers and even smartphones to watch television programming, we are still basically watching a lot of television. We're just using different output devices, more sophisticated, more nimble, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller devices to watch television. So what else television has done other than it has made us watch more of it? Well, it has altered the way that parenting is done. Sociological studies show that mothers used to say that evening time used to be the most hectic time, and often children would not want to go to bed before invention of television because they had a lot of energy. And since the spread of television in the 1950s, you could just sort of plop a kid in front of a TV set, and you'd have yourself a kid who would be mesmerized right by a television screen. And so television becomes like a surrogate parent. And clearly, it's not just children who've been impacted by it, and adults have been impacted by it too. And after all, adults come from children. And as children grow up, having developed a habit of watching a lot of television, as adults, they spend much of their leisure time watching TV. And there have been all kinds of detrimental impact of that because it has turned generations of Americans into couch potatoes. And of course, as visual medium proliferated, it became more addictive now that the internet is within pretty much everyone's reach in wealthy countries like the United States. Now that smartphones are within pretty much everyone's reach within the United States and other wealthy countries, the appeal of visual medium seems to be irresistible to the point of addiction. And years down the road, decades down the road, we will find just how devastating the impact of visual medium has been. But we should remember that television was the one that started it all. And before there were video games, before there was the internet and Facebook, we had television. That's the granddaddy of visual media, and it has profoundly changed the entire landscape of the American society, economics, and politics.